The airport was bustling, the terminal humming with the collective energy of travelers hustling to gates, tugging suitcases, and juggling coffee cups. Among the sea of people, Martin Cole, a single dad in his late 30s, struggled to manage his two young children, Ellie, 7, and Max, 5. Martin had flown many times for work, but this was different. This wasn't a business trip, this was a family vacation, and he was determined to make it perfect despite his nerves. He fumbled with the boarding passes, trying to keep Ellie from pulling on his sleeve and Max from running into the crowd. "Stay close, please," Martin said, his voice calm but firm. "Remember, no wandering off." The children, sensing both the excitement and tension, complied half-heartedly. As they reached the gate, the boarding line snaked around the waiting area. Martin held Max's hand and carried Ellie's backpack, her small arms wrapped tightly around the straps. Passengers in line gave him sideways glances. Some smiled politely, others whispered among themselves. It wasn't unusual. A single dad traveling alone with two kids always attracted attention. But Martin was used to it, mostly. As they boarded the plane, chaos seemed to intensify. Max tripped over his own feet, nearly dropping a juice box, while Ellie insisted on carrying a stuffed panda that was half her size. Martin apologized profusely to nearby passengers as he struggled to maneuver through the aisle. "Wow, he's flying solo with two kids," a woman whispered to her friend, clearly amused. "Good luck with that," the friend replied, stifling a laugh. Martin smiled politely but ignored the remarks. He had been through worse: glares at the grocery store, side eyes in restaurants, whispers on the school playground, but this time felt heavier. The laughter of strangers, tinged with judgment, was sharp. He finally reached their seats in the middle of the plane. Martin tried to settle Ellie and Max, buckling them in while juggling his own carry-on. "Okay, guys, we're going to have fun today," he said brightly. "I promise." The murmurs and snickers didn't stop. A man a row behind shook his head and chuckled loudly. "He's in for it." Martin took a deep breath and ignored it. After all, the flight hadn't even taken off yet. Once the plane was airborne, things got complicated. Max immediately wanted juice, Ellie wanted to watch cartoons, and Martin's tray table collapsed under the weight of snacks, books, and a small backpack. "Excuse me, sir," said a flight attendant politely, stopping by to help. "Would you like some assistance?" Martin smiled, grateful. "Thank you, but I think I've got it, mostly." The children were now squabbling over a coloring book. Martin tried to mediate, explaining the concepts of sharing and patience, but his voice was drowned out by the occasional snicker from nearby passengers. "Single dad struggles," one man whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, smirking. Martin's cheeks flushed, but he stayed composed. "Ignore them, Dad," Ellie said softly, sensing his embarrassment. Max, oblivious, continued to splash juice on his lap. Then turbulence hit. The plane shook, and Martin instinctively grabbed both kids, holding them close. Drinks spilled, snacks fell, and Max let out a frightened scream. Suddenly, all the laughter and judgment ceased. The plane rocked more violently, and passengers braced themselves. Martin's protective instincts kicked in, shielding his children. "It's okay," he whispered. "I've got you, I promise." The flight attendants sprang into action. One secured the beverage carts, another checked on nervous passengers, and the lead flight attendant moved directly to Martin's row. "Sir, can I help you?" she asked, her tone professional but urgent. Martin, hands full, shook his head. "No, I've got them." The turbulence worsened, and a nearby tray table flew open, spilling drinks. Chaos erupted, but Martin never let go of Ellie or Max. He held them tightly, whispering reassuring words, all while keeping a calm exterior. Passengers who had laughed earlier watched, some with widening eyes, some with guilt creeping across their faces. Martin remained a steady center in the storm. When the turbulence finally subsided, the plane settled into a smooth glide. The lead flight attendant approached Martin again. This time, she stopped, stood at attention, and saluted him. Passengers turned their heads in confusion. "What's going on?" someone muttered. The flight crew, one by one, formed a line, giving Martin the same respectful attention. "Sir," the lead attendant said, "that was remarkable. Your composure and dedication to your children are commendable. Truly, you were our hero today." The cabin was silent. The earlier laughter, whispers, and judgment had vanished. In their place was admiration, awe, and newfound respect. The passengers realized they had underestimated the man who had done nothing extraordinary except what any parent would do in a moment of crisis: protect their children. Ellie leaned against her father and whispered, "See, Dad. You're awesome." Max, still clinging to his juice-stained shirt, nodded vigorously. Martin smiled, a mix of exhaustion and pride washing over him. "Thanks, kids," he said softly. "We made it through together." The flight continued uneventfully, but the atmosphere had changed. Strangers offered smiles, and a few even struck up friendly conversation with Martin about traveling with children. He realized that respect wasn't demanded, it was earned in moments that revealed character, courage, and care. By the time the plane landed, Martin's 2 children were asleep, curled against him. Passengers applauded as they disembarked, some even stopping to thank Martin personally. As Martin wheeled his children toward baggage claim, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey. The judgment, the laughter, it had stung. But the recognition from the flight crew, and the silent acknowledgement of fellow passengers, reminded him that strength wasn't always loud. Sometimes, it was quiet, patient, and steadfast. He carried his children, checked his luggage, and stepped into the warm sunlight of the destination. The vacation ahead was just beginning, but one lesson had already been cemented: respect comes from actions, not appearances. And sometimes, it takes a moment of crisis to show people what true courage looks like. Epilogue. A father's quiet heroism. Back home, Martin would recall this flight often. Not for the turbulence, not for the spilled juice, not for the whispers and laughs, but for the moment the world had seen him not as a struggling single dad, but as a man capable of unwavering love and bravery. The passengers who once laughed had learned an unspoken truth: never underestimate someone quietly doing the hardest work of all. Martin smiled as he tucked his children into bed that night. "We did it, team," he whispered. And for the first time in a long time, he felt seen, not just as a father, but as a hero in his own right.